It's Tuesday, the 7th of May 2013, a day that the Code Coalition pulled all its members out of all House committees. Good evening, I'm Betty Kialo.
Indeed, and I'm James Smart. First, the highlights.
Code has recalled its members from all the already formulated committees, e.g. appointments with immediate effect.
Code pulls out of all House committees as battle over key House committees.
The propagators of the message, who are anonymous, are not an authority in the Catholic Church.
Catholic bishops dismiss pressure to change stance on condoms.
We are watching you. Police receive speed cameras to boost war against road drivers. Terror gangs injures 7 in Nyandarua overnight attack.
Well, good evening and welcome. Now, the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy has pulled out its members from all House committees over a tussle to control key House committees. Now, while pulling out its members, Code said it would not relent until it has a controlling stake in the two watchdog committees. That's the Parliamentary Investment and the Parliamentary Accounts Committees. And as KTN's Patrick Amimo reports, the stalemate is threatening to paralyze House business.
When the House convened in the afternoon, Speaker J.B. Muturi sought a report on resolving a stalemate over membership to the two watchdog committees, PAC and PIC.
As at 1:30 p.m. today, the Office of the Clerk had only received the list of members nominated to the remaining committees from one of the coalition parties.
The Jubilee Coalition has submitted.
Now, the long-anticipated battle for control of watchdog committees finally erupted on the floor of the National Assembly. As KTN's Noah Otieno reports, the ugliest confrontation is predictably about two of the most powerful committees of the House, where careers are made or shattered and where MPs flex their muscles of the executive. So, how exactly do these committees work, and why is there such a scramble for them? Take a look at this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
In the new standing orders, the operational word in the composition of the select committees in the National Assembly is numbers. There was never any doubt that the Jubilee side, being the majority, would control the House and all the committees. But the Code side is seeking to convince the House to let parliamentary tradition prevail, where such watchdog committees like the Public Accounts and the Public Investments Committees are controlled by the opposition, or, like in the current House, the minority side. Out of the 17 members allowed for PAC and the PIC, Jubilee will constitute the majority, although they are ready to let Code members chair each team.
What is so difficult? You may even, because you are in government, give us the 14. I know you will use your powers and influence to buy 2 or 3 and get back to your side.
The selection committee will use the lists given by each side to nominate members to the PAC and the PIC. The nominations will be based on the strength of each side. The reason there is such a strong fight now is because in the proceedings of each committee, final decisions are taken after a vote, and the majority carries the day no matter what arguments are advanced at the committee stage. The weaker your side, the less they will be heard. No matter which side the chairperson comes from, he or she must sign the report adopted by the majority after the vote. So, all a person has to do to get the favor of the committee is to ensure they whip the side with more members to vote a certain way. The Public Accounts Committee is so central because it queries how the government spends the money budgeted for in a financial year and can recommend actions against those who misappropriate public funds. The Public Investments Committee keeps an eye on government businesses and how they are run or disposed of. Previously, chairpersons of these two committees have become much sought after and sometimes very popular politicians because they can make the lives of government contractors and government officials very difficult. Now, KTN Prime.
To the United Kingdom now, where President Uhuru Kenyatta has in the last hour or so met with British Prime Minister David Cameron on the sidelines of a key conference on Somalia. The two leaders pledged to deepen relationships between the two countries despite the earlier uncertainty following Uhuru's indictment by the ICC. At the conference, Kenya is pushing for the repatriation of Somali refugees in its territory to end the humanitarian crisis in the camps. President Uhuru Kenyatta says Kenya supports the timely return and resettlement of Somali refugees to their motherland as peace returns to the war-torn country. The president says it is untenable to have Somali refugees occupy a camp that carries a population larger than the third largest city in Kenya. Hundreds of Somali nationals living in the UK came out to the streets to demand what they call a just solution to the Somalia crisis. Our UK correspondent Atieno Otieno has the latest from the historic Lancaster House where the conference is taking place.
At least 55 countries and organizations gathered in London in a bid to chart ways of promoting peace, cohesion and economic growth in war-torn Somalia. Well, security is tight at the historical Lancaster House, where negotiations were held in the 60s that led to the end of colonial rule in Kenya. Incidentally, this is also the venue of the Somalia conference. The conference was co-hosted by Somalia's transitional government, led by President Sheikh Sharif Ahmed and the UK Prime Minister David Cameron. President Uhuru Kenyatta was in attendance, even as controversy brewed on United Kingdom's change of heart, as the UK government had vowed to make only essential contact with Kenya's fourth president, who is facing charges on crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court. Outside the conference center, groups of Somalian nationals living in the United Kingdom held demonstrations, with each making their demands to the world leaders.
You don't have any credibility or knowledge to run a nation.
We support us, the Kenya as to support for our troops, to stay, for the in Jubaland state. So we are against the Somalian President Hassan Sheikh to to make divide and rule, for the Somalian community.
So we want to get peace and everything. We want to be part of Jubaland. You don't want to be Jubaland to be a part of Somalia.
I'm an activist with an organisation called Hands Off Somalia, and we're here because we utterly oppose any British involvement in Somalia. So we say, no to British involvement, no to the division of Somalia.
In a communique from the conference, the delegates agreed on a 7-point plan that will see 1. A handover of power from the transitional government to a united administration by August this year, provide more support for the African Union peacekeepers, increase humanitarian aid, and bring piracy suspects to book in countries away from Somalia. No fewer than 4 Somali presidents attended the conference, an indication that stability between regions within Somalia is still far from being achieved. Atieno Otieno reporting for KTN News at Lancaster House, London.
All right, now residents of Mogadishu in Somalia have largely welcomed the International Conference on Somalia, which is being co-hosted by the governments of Somalia and the United Kingdom. Now, some of the residents of the Mogadishu say they expect good results from the London meeting.
Well, others are hopeful that the conference will help improve security and the economy of the locals back in Somalia. There are, however, those who feel that the main responsibility for turning around the fortunes of Somalia ultimately lies with the Somalis. The conference was organized to garner international support for Somalia, which is trying to rebuild itself following decades of civil war.
Well, over 50 countries and organizations, including the United Nations and the IMF, have been invited to the conference. Somalia has in the last 1 year recorded positive gains, including the liberation by Somalia security forces backed by African Union mission troops of major towns and cities that were under the control of the Al-Shabaab terror group.
Coming back home, Catholic bishops around the country have disassociated themselves from a recent advert on local dailies that promoted the use of condoms in the Catholic community.
The bishops advised all Catholics and people who believe in the sacredness of life and dignity of the human person to ignore the advert.
Well, led by Cardinal John Joy, the clerics reiterated that the stand of the Universal Catholic Church on condom use has not changed.
For choice are not Catholics in the sense of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. We, in communion with the Universal Catholic Church, therefore disassociate ourselves completely from this advert and advise all Catholics and people who believe in the sanctity of life and dignity of the human person to ignore it. The stand of the Universal Catholic Church on condom use has not changed.
Alright, now the health sector has been allocated less than 6%, which is not enough. Health experts say the allocation is not enough to implement the ambitious manifesto the government has for improving the country's healthcare system, more so maternal healthcare. KTN's Catherine Owantho was in Korogosho, where expectant mothers are still spending 20 shillings for clinic checkups and are still paying midwives 300 shillings because clinics remain above their financial reach.
Margaret walks as much as she can. This stabilizes her heart rate and strengthens her muscles in preparation for the birth of her first child. This way, she can perhaps avoid a complicated delivery because she has no plans of going to a maternity clinic.
Sasa mimi nilikuwa na plan, sasa kaa nitakuwa nimejiweza kidogo, pali tu ndafikia ndio ndaweza, hata kaa ni kwa huyo mkunga ndaenda kuzaa juu sina otherwise.
Margaret has never seen a clinic that offers free maternal health care since the inauguration of President Uhuru Kenyatta. She goes for checkups at the Babandogo City Council clinic. This clinic, she says, has no maternity ward and alternatives charge between 1,500 to 3,000 shillings for delivery, a price not many here in Korogosho can afford.
Hiyo 20 bakuja itolewa. Na hata hiyo hata ya free, hata hiyo ya free ati pesa ya president tujaisikia huku.
On the day of his inauguration, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced that maternal health care would be free within the next 100 days. But it's been almost a month, and down here in Korogosho, it seems that maternal health care is not free, an indication that making a promise is very different from implementing it.
The costing of these things have been done by the experts, and I think which the ministry have the figures, I think which the treasury have, and it could be something close to 15 billion Kenya shillings to implement this program annually.
According to the budgetary estimates, the health sector has been allocated approximately 64 billion shillings. This is less than 6% of the estimated national budget of 1 trillion shillings.
The Abuja Declaration demands that the budget of health sector for any country should be 15% of the total national budget. And that's the only way we can achieve quality health care for all citizens.
Dr. John Ongech, who is one of the directors at the Kenyatta National Hospital, tabled a proposal on how the implementation of free maternal health care can work. He hopes that by the time the budget is read, the estimated budget allocations will be reviewed upwards. Catherine Owantho, KTN.
And a reminder to our big question tonight, we had asked, do you support CORE's withdrawal from all parliamentary committees? Do you support CORE's withdrawal from all parliamentary committees? Do send your yes or no response with a brief comment to the number 8040, and Smart and I will sample your views during this newscast and give you the full results at the tail end of this live bulletin.
Absolutely, Betty, do stay with us. But just ahead.
Ahead on KTN Business Today, better prospects for Kenya's electrification as African Development Bank approves funds for Lake Turkana wind power project. Also coming up on tonight's bulletin, Central Bank of Kenya lowers the lending rate by 1%. What does this mean for commercial banks' cost of credit? We'll let you know. Join me, Joy Doreen Bira, on KTN Business Today. Business Today. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. The pressure is on for commercial banks in Kenya to lower the cost of credit. This follows a decision by the Central Bank of Kenya's Monetary Policy Committee to lower the benchmark rate further to 8.5% from 9.5%. Despite efforts by the CBK to lower interest rates, commercial banks continue to charge borrowers highly. Adelaide Chengole with the spotlight on the cost of borrowing.
The rate reduction announced by the banking industry regulator Tuesday afternoon was the fifth in its series of attempts to lower the cost of credit. Cumulatively, the CBK has since July last year, when borrowing rate was at a high of 18%, effected a 950 basis point reduction. However, this relief on banks has not been met with equal reduction on retail loan borrowing rates in the market. Currently, the commercial bank's average borrowing rate is at 18%, with some selected banks still charging as high as 27% for loans. This has stunted the growth of the country as borrowers opt to put projects on hold. In its decision to cut the lending rate, the CBK pointed at the low and stable inflation supported by stability in both the exchange rate and the declining international oil prices. Additionally, the regulator also noted that confidence in the economy had increased following the elections in March 2013, with the NSE 20 share index remaining buoyant with increased foreign participation. But even as consumers celebrate, analysts say this might be the last reduction in the CBR, as the inevitable increase in government spending brought about by the creation of county administrations piles pressure on the economy. Also, the president's 14% increase in minimum wages is likely to increase the burden on the country's coffers. Adelaide Chengole, KTN Business Today.
And Postal Corporation of Kenya is targeting to shore up its current revenue base to 5 billion shillings in 3 years by upgrading its infrastructure and improving its operations. According to Postmaster General Enoch Kinara, Postal is currently making its services accessible by installing standalone letter boxes at petrol stations, gating communities, other social places to end the inconvenience of its customers traveling to post offices to collect their mail. Speaking when he flagged off a fleet of motorcycles, pickups, trucks, Kinara said this was part of the firm's effort to inject efficiency in its services. Recently, the corporation announced an 80 million shillings investment in rolling out national payment switch that will see financial institutions share payment infrastructure and capitalize on its expansive network of over 600 offices countrywide for agency services. And the push for sufficient and reliable electric power in Kenya has moved a notch higher with 2 signings by the African Development Bank. The 2 projects, the Lake Turkana wind power estimated at 75 billion shillings and the Kenya-Ethiopia electricity highway projects, are expected to offer the much sought after relief. Here's the report.
In what is the clearest signal of the Lake Turkana wind power project taking off, the project will include the construction of a wind farm featuring 365 turbines of 350 kilowatts capacity each. This will be part of Kenya's long-term goal to cut reliance on hydropower, thus the support of the African Development Bank.
Clearly, Kenya has very high comparative advantage in wind because that area has a consistent and high velocity of wind throughout the year. For example, neighboring Ethiopia is focused on hydro because of the geographic location of hills and so on. They are focused on hydro, whereas Kenya, because of its endowment with wind, that's why we selected this project.
On its part, the government of Kenya will be tasked to construct a 428-kilometer transmission line required to evacuate power from the project site to the national grid.
Partners who have entered the development of this project, such as Aldrich International, and then other financial partners such as Norfund from Norway, IFU of Denmark, Vestas, and KPMP, who were the original promoters of this project.
Along the same electrification lines, Kenya and Ethiopia have launched the highway project that will see the construction of a 1,068-kilometer high-voltage electricity highway with the sole goal of increasing access to electrification, whose biggest benefactors will be households, businesses and industries by the year 2018.
The economies of both countries will benefit both in terms of access to power, but also employment opportunities. In addition, there will be some spillover effects into the local communities.
The groundbreaking for the project is expected by the end of the year.
And the Kenya shilling still remains strong up until today. Let's take a look at how it's faring against other international currencies and also a look at the Nairobi Securities Exchange stock market. And that